Hello everybody, today we're taking a look at the HGLRC Sector 132 4K. Powered by 1106 3800 kV motors, Gem Fan 2540 props, or without the prop guards we can run 3035 Gem Fan props. The flight controller is the HGLRC F4 Zeus, which also features 15 amp 4-in-1 ESC, and it's got 16 megabytes of space for black box. Caddx Tar Sear for your FPV and your HD recording needs, or 4K if you choose to go that far. Connecting to the Tarsier USB port with the whoops on requires a right angle adapter. The VTX is the HGLRC FD, which goes from 25 milliwatts all the way up to 400 milliwatts. Comes with a battery pad to secure your battery down to. Circular polarized antenna mounted to a TPU mount. It does come with a low ESR capacitor. The camera mounting looks like a TPU print to me, but it seems to hold the camera just fine. It comes with 2 battery straps that I felt were too long for the batteries I chose to use. You do get 6 of the Gem Fan 2540 props, as well as 6 of the Gem Fan 3035 props. And you also get all the screws you'll need to remount the motors without the hoops, and your additional props. It also comes with a mount for putting on a GoPro or an Orca, and it goes right on top of the camera there. It also comes with this printed piece, but I don't know where it goes. Bottom plate's 3mm thick, top plate looks like it's 2mm thick. With the prop guards on, it weighs almost 155 grams. With the 3S 650 milliamp battery, it weighs about 214.5 grams. Without the prop guards and the 3-inch props, it weighs 137.5 grams. Again, with the 3S 650 milliamp battery, it weighs just about 198 grams. So we've got a lot of flight footage. This is kind of a transformer as I see it, or maybe an all-in-one, or something that goes both ways. It's kind of that Cinewhoop style of machine, as well as a machine that you can freestyle with, or maybe even want to do some racing with. This flight that we're starting off with is at 3S 650 milliamp, and it's the same battery that I later use in another flight for kind of our filming or photography sort of flight, where it goes on for, this flight goes on for 4 minutes and 26 seconds, and the more cruisy style flight with the prop guards, with the Gem Fan 2540 props, again on the 3S 650 milliamp battery, that goes on for over 6 minutes. Or actually, sorry, I got that wrong. It's 5 minutes and 40 seconds. So really long flight time if you're cruising, and you could probably even get more out of it. The battery that I'm using is relatively small, and I do micros. And, you might want to put an 850 on there, and then that battery strap would probably work just fine. I just thought it was way too much for the 650s that I've been using. Of course, if you're using China Hobby Line batteries, those are much more substantial batteries. They're much thicker and heavier, so flight times might vary in size as well. One thing that I always have troubles with when it comes to these 4K or HD recording cameras is because my flight style doesn't translate into a real good looking picture. I tend to get nose down, I tend to look a lot at the ground, and I don't know if that's just me or if it's my flight style or my inability to adapt, but I would kind of like to see the ability, and I know I'm asking for a lot, in these kind of dual cameras, not the all-in-ones, to where we have actually 2 cameras in one housing. The ability to adjust one, that's a big ask, I think. Or just more up tilt with the HD recording camera, because I think the amount that they have now isn't enough, at least not enough for my sort of flight style. Again, I could be out on an island on that. I could be asking for something that's just ridiculous. But if you don't ask, you can't get. That's what my mom always told me. But anywho, so this thing flies fairly well. These props, these Gem Fan props, they've been around a while, and they can be fairly magical for certain quads. Now, the first thing when I looked at this and running 1106 motors was, oh no, we're going to try to push 3-inch props. And then I saw the props that they use, and that's good. So I would say if you're looking at exploring other props, be very, very careful. The magic of these props are they're very light and they have pretty low pitch. So 1106 motor at a low kV can handle them pretty good, but if you start adding weight to the prop, or if you start adding more pitch to the prop, you're going to have probably results that you don't want. So they chose a wise prop for this, and I applaud them for that. On 4S, the flight is, it's more aggressive. You're growing more cells, but it's also shorter, so there's a payoff. It does come pre-tuned with 2 different PID profiles. So if you're running 3S, it has one PID profile, and if you're running 4S, it's running the other PID profile. You could run 4S with the 2.5-inch props, but it seems to be that because the flight time isn't likely to be longer, it kind of defeats the purpose in doing that. So if you want to do real smooth flying, and we'll see some of that. I'm not going to play the whole 5 minutes and 40 seconds of the cruisy cinematography sort of flying, because that's just way too much, and most people won't stick around for most of that. But I wanted to show you this 3S flight, because this is kind of in the middle. and I think it's a good point to show because it shows the efficiency as well as, you know, how I can fly in my space. The Caddx Tarsier camera, I like the Tarsier camera, and the FPV camera is really good. I think the Ratel is based upon the FPV camera from the Tarsier. I could be wrong, correct me on that if you've heard otherwise, or Caddx has made an official statement I'm just unaware of, but it seems very, very similar. And that's a nice thing about having two actual cameras inside this housing, is that you have a really good FPV camera. So in months like we're flying now, you can actually pick up the little sticks and branches, the scraggle as we refer to it as, and maybe have an opportunity to avoid it if we can. We're getting near the end of the flight, but still a ways to go. We're going to do the 4S flight after this because it's a little bit shorter, and then we're going to go into the sample of the cruisy footage, and then I also need to show you the FPV footage. Hopefully by the time we get done with that and we get back to the desk, we'll have just about everything covered. Okay, this is our 4S flight that I've been mentioning, and this is on a 550 milliamp battery. So the weight difference between those two batteries isn't a lot. Of course, we have that one extra cell with going from 3 to 4S as the previous flight that you've seen. So the punch outs are going to be a little bit more aggressive, and I use the same PID profile for both 3S and 4S. So 4S feels a little bit tighter, but I think also we have a little bit more prop wash. I think we might need a little less D on 4S, but you know, it is a bass tune. I wouldn't say it's, you know, locked in or anything like that. I would just say it's a pretty good tune that, you know, you get to see how it produces results. You know, I don't fly in a manner that's easy on tunes, so in many cases you may find that with your flights that the tune works out best, but I see a little bit of chop in some of those hard turns, and the HD camera really brings that out. If we just had an FPV camera, we wouldn't hardly notice that, but the HD recordings, those little judders, and that's, you know, you want good footage when you've got a 4K camera. Oh, I should mention, I'm not recording in 4K. My computer can barely process 4K footage. I had to do a bunch of software upgrades in order to get it to do that, so I'm recording in 1080p at 60 frames a second. And for me, you know, that's kind of what I have to do on this channel. This is not a full-time job. I don't have a computer that's brand new and good for gaming and streaming and doing all sorts of editing. Actually, my computer is about 7 or 8 years old. The punch out backwards over the house, while it wasn't great, I have been requested to go that way by a few people from time to time. Sometimes I forget to do it. In the summer, or in the spring, when we get some leaves out, I think that punch from the chimney side to the shed side, that will become more impressive because you'll see how tight that gets. Also, the angle of attack is much less when you have all the leaves and the branches and all the growth that you get in the spring and summer. So that hole becomes quite a bit smaller than it appears now. I thought it was a little bit curious they included a mount for a GoPro or a Session or what have you. And I don't know why you would do that with a quad that can already record on board high definition or even 4K footage. That's a bit curious to me, but maybe there's a purpose out there that I'm just not familiar with, because I do micros and I don't oftentimes see or have a need for GoPro style footage. I didn't mention it in the quick roll, but I'll try to show you back at the desk. This frame is fairly flexible. But I have one major crash that I'm also going to show you too. In the next flight, when we look at the slow cruisy, I'll also show we'll also listen to the audio that it comes from, because in the Caddx Tarsier V2, the audio quality is better, and I think it's something that will be bearable at least. It's not going to sound great, it's not GoPro quality, but it is better, and you deserve to actually listen to it. Two things here. We have an overcast day, so not great, but also this is the cruisy flight. This is actually, as you can see, we've got snow on the ground still. This was actually a few weeks ago. My weather, I live in the Midwest, my weather hasn't been good. I know many subscribers will already know that spiel. We have all seasons here. We have fall, winter, spring, and summer. It gets to be 100 degrees, and some days it's below zero. We have winds sometimes. It's very rarely dead calm. But this is our cruisy flight. Now this is the portion when I want to give you a listen to the onboard sound. So I'm going to put some sort of icon or something on the screen, maybe the monkeys with the ears covered. So if you're sensitive to that sort of sound, I'll decrease the volume level on it a lot to try to make it more bearable. It's not terrible, but it is, I suspect to some people it's not pleasant. So we're gonna listen to this flight in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I should also mention that there was quite a bit of wind on this day, unfortunately. I should have put the prop guards back on and flown it on some other days, but I haven't gotten to that. This gives you a sample. I think what you'll find, and because I've already shown it in much more aggressive flight, that you can get stable footage out of this every once in a while. And you can kind of see it in the wind. If you study the footage a little bit, you'll see, depending upon my flight direction, the wind kind of comes down the street, kind of down between the houses, and not out, but between the houses, but all the way down the street and then through those two houses down at the end of the street in the cul-de-sac. That's kind of the wind direction that I notice it. So when you see it, you can kind of almost, you'll see it pick up a little bit. There might be some micro vibrations in the footage, and then it stops because you change direction or the wind eased up a little bit, and it goes back to pretty smooth footage. But also something else that I need to mention is that I'm not super sensitive to micro vibrations in HD footage. I think there are many people out there that have a much better eye. So if you see in any of the flights, kind of leave your interpretation down below. So if someone comes along and maybe they aren't as well versed as you are, they might be able to learn something from you that could be left in the comment section. That's really useful to have more people than just myself contributing to what they see. I try to share my experience. That's the talky part of this. But I also encourage everyone who comes to the video to leave your experiences as well, because that's critically, crowdsourcing opinions on stuff is way better than just 1, 2, or 3, or even if you say you have 5 or 6 reviewers of this, it's much better to have people who have more experience, whether it's about the company, the components, or the product in its whole. We've seen several minutes of the cruising around video footage, and hopefully that's been enough to sacrifice, or that's been enough for you to get an idea of what you would get when you have the prop guards on with the 2.5-inch props. Again, this flight goes for 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Probably could get a little bit more on a better, warmer day. Batteries don't like being cold, and this was a relatively cold day. I think it was like 38 or 39 maybe. Not terrible for this time of year. I'll take it, but it's not exactly comfortable, especially because I've got my tuchus on the cement porch, so my backside's getting a fair bit cold. So let's jump into some FPV footage. This is the view you get in the goggles. And I think this is, again, really, really important to show, especially if you're not familiar with these cameras. You may think that the HD footage I've shown up to this point is what you're looking at. No, this isn't a DJI system. Those are much more expensive than this entire quad and everything I'm using to fly it with. So this is your FPV footage. This is what you see in the goggles, at least represented by the DVR of the goggles, which are the SkyZone 030 goggles. Those are my favorite goggles. I did order some Orcas. We'll see when they show up and see what I think of those when they do show up. I did have to pay for those, not a freebie. So I wanted to support innovation. That's why I bought the Orcas, if anybody's asking. I wanted to support those guys, that company, doing something new, pushing that section of the hobby forward. Because really, up to this point, Amway stopped, and SkyZone made some really good goggles. But outside of those, Fat Shark and SkyZone, who else is in the market to kind of push things forward, to think differently, to give consumers what they want, and push other companies to do the same, So I think it's, it's fairly important, and so I took channel money, and I bought some Orcas, and I'll share my experiences with those after I've used them for a while, whenever they show up. This is that crash that I mentioned. It is the most dramatic of the crashes that I had during my time with it, and I'm going to be quiet as we run up to the crash, just because I think that's an important part of being able to listen to the impact and how severe, or maybe not severe, it might have been. I mentioned during the flights that the frame is actually a little bit flexible. It's not terrible. We've felt worse. I've got my thumbs in here, pressing down on the motors. We have a fair bit of flex. I think it's something to be aware of. And here we have a look at the carbon fiber weave. Now, I've been told, and you might disagree, that's okay, that this weave is kind of like wallpaper. It could really be anything. And Kebab has actually got like a podcast. I don't know if it's still on his YouTube channel or not, where he's talking to an engineer where he pretty much confirmed that. Now, that could be specific to the company he works for, but I've been told by 1 or 2 other people the same. Their credentials, I don't know, but it's something that I'll put out there, that this may or may not actually indicate the other layers of the carbon fiber and how it's laid out. Also, while we're looking at the bottom, I think one of the things that makes these prop guards so good is that they rolled the plastic. Of course, the materials make a difference, but if you can see that, if I can get enough light, this is a rolled edge and there's a slight gap in there. And then they've also got good 3 supports. I don't know that this shape does anything more than it would otherwise, but it gives you 2 wider contact points out here. I've got this one back on wrong. I should actually rotate that a little bit. Or maybe not, because if we have a frontal impact, that would be right. Maybe I need to rotate this one a little bit over here so I get it more like that. Yeah, I think that's what I should have done. When I put these back on, I should have rotated this one just a touch. This one looks good. This one needs to rotate. And it does have slots in there. That it's got 2 holes in the prop guards, and it's got 2 slots, so there's a little bit of gap. So you can rotate things a little bit in order to get them in the position that you want them. Also, this back end has, if you want crossfire, and I think you can order it with other receivers. I don't see crossfire listed. Maybe they're planning that later. But I see FrSky XM Plus. And also Fly Sky or Plug and Play. They offer a black and a blue version, so I have, of course, unfortunately, I got the black one, but that's all right. So, you know, I like blue. We have some blue, and that should suffice. So this looks like a crossfire antenna mount. I could be wrong there. Seems like it should clear. You could also move the antenna from this position down to this position if you'd prefer to have it down there. And of course you have a large pad to put various sizes of batteries. And we do have a couple of notches on either side of where your strap would go. So it's only designed for one strap. I would like to see, and I don't, it's mainly there because the VTX is in the way. You see where we have this hole and this hole. I would like to see another post, because if you have a severe crash and you come flying down from a high altitude and you land upside down, this is going to be the impact point, the battery, and it could hit down. It feels very, very firm, but it is giving a little tiny bit. But an extra post right there would have shored things up. But we've got our VTX down there. Hopefully you can see that the VTX is right down in there. So they weren't able to do that. That was something that they removed. But it's something that I needed to bring to your attention. Of course, this is the camera angle that I was flying at out back with the 3 and 4S. So you get an idea how much camera angle you can go without getting that into your FPV or HD footage, so that's pretty good. Kind of surprising, really. I didn't expect it to be able to tip that far without getting something in the FPV or HD recording footage. Of course, I mentioned it already, that USB port when you've got the prop guards on for the Caddx Tarsier is kind of, you know, blocked. You can use a right angle adapter to get in there. They don't include one in the kit. I think I got one in a different kit, so I'm trying not to confuse myself here. And right above there is the micro SD card slot. If you're using this, you need to use a high speed. I think it's a U3. I use the SanDisk Ultras. They're kind of a red and gold. For the most part, I think I have all 32 gigs. I bought like a handful of those on sale when they're like $14 at a local store. So that's what I use to record on, and that's tucked away right in there. There is no protection to keep that in, so you might want to have a little piece of tape that goes from the top, and then you just kind of stick it down to this bottom board. So your piece of tape would come from the top of the SD card slot, and you would just kind of stick it down to this thicker area of this bottom board, just as one little added protection. If you do have a crash, your SD card may eject. I've not personally had that happen, but I'm sure it's just a matter of time and enough crashes before that does happen. So a little piece of tape there might save you some heartburn later. You can see that they did not secure down the battery lead in any way, shape, or form. I ended up running my battery around the antenna like this just to make sure I kept everything up on the top of the platform and that it didn't come over. You could, if you had the different style of batteries, you know, you could plug it in over here. You could have your battery and then your lead coming back that way and plug it in here. But again, there's no lead tied down in there. So I would suggest finding a way of doing that. You could run a zip tie through this little section, loop it around the battery lead and zip tie it, but that could interfere depending upon the size of batteries you're running. So you kind of have to pick out what you're going to do with the battery lead, if you're going to do something, depending upon the size of battery that you're running. Overall, I thought the quad performed well. No, it's not the fastest, most powerful quad in the world, but when you're looking for a quad that does more than one thing well, I think that's kind of a difficult thing to ask. I thought as far as a Cinewhoop, it did pretty well, and as far as a freestyle 4K sort of quad running 3-inch props, I thought it did fairly well as well. It's not going to be the highest performer in either category, but if you want one quad to have 2 different flight styles, this looks like a really good option. Right now, I'm seeing it come in on HGLRC site. They actually show that they have U.S. stock. Whether that's true or not, I do not know. But they're saying that they've got U.S. stock and it ships in 2 to 6 business days. $191 on their site. Let's see what old Banggood listed at. Banggood does not show they even have stock yet, and they're showing a price of $168 and change, but that's without a receiver. They don't give me an option to click on a receiver to see what the price is with a receiver. If you're international and you order directly from HGLRC, you'll find that the price is $171 with FlySky and $173 with XM Plus. Of course, I don't know what your denomination would be, but that's what it is in US dollars if you order from HGLRC from their probably China warehouse. Whew. Long video, but if I've forgotten something, there will be links down in the video description so you can go take another look at the product, the details that are printed on the web pages. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.